Nobody in the galaxy had ever seen a species eat mold on purpose. Danny Reyes did not know this when she packed her grandmother's recipes for the diplomatic mission. She did not know that 400 alien civilizations had evolved past the need for bacterial interaction. She did not know that the word fermentation would one day be classified as a slur in 17 star systems. All she knew was that humanity had finally received an invitation to join the Galactic Council, and she was determined to make a good impression. The message had arrived 3 months ago on a frequency that Earth scientists had never detected before. It was polite, formal, and slightly confused. The Council had observed humanity for decades, studying their broadcasts, their conflicts, their strange little blue planet. They had concluded that humans were adequately civilized and worthy of consideration for membership. Danny had been chosen as Earth's ambassador for a simple reason. She was not a general, a scientist, or a politician. She was a former chef who had spent 20 years traveling the world, learning recipes, and bringing people together through food. The United Earth Council believed that humanity's best representative was someone ordinary, someone warm, someone who could show the galaxy that humans were more than their wars and their weapons. Captain Leo Okonkwo commanded the diplomatic vessel that carried her to the stars. He was a calm man with gray hair and steady hands, the kind of leader who made everyone around him feel safe. His ship, the Horizon's Edge, was not a warship. It carried no missiles, no plasma cannons. It carried seeds, spices, cooking equipment, and 200 bottles of wine that Danny had personally selected. "You really think aliens will want to try Earth food?" Leo asked her one evening as they traveled through the void between stars. Danny smiled. "Food is universal. Every culture in human history has bonded over meals. Why would aliens be any different?" Leo did not have an answer for that. Their escort arrived on the 14th day of travel. A sleek silver vessel appeared alongside them, and a transmission crackled through their communication system. The voice that spoke was translated by their computers, but something about the tone felt nervous. "Human vessel, I am Krill Ambassador Sorvin. I will guide you to Station Pre-March for your evaluation." Danny activated the video link and saw her first alien. Sorvin was insectoid, with 6 limbs and compound eyes that reflected light like broken mirrors. His body was covered in a smooth exoskeleton the color of copper, and when he moved, it was with precise, mechanical efficiency. "Thank you for meeting us," Danny said warmly. "We are honored by this opportunity." Sorvin's antennae twitched. "The Council is curious about your species. You have a reputation for adaptability. We wish to understand what that means." "We would be happy to show you," Danny replied. "In fact, I was hoping to prepare a traditional Earth meal for the Council members." A gesture of goodwill. There was a long pause. Sorvin's compound eyes seemed to focus on her more intensely. "You wish to share biological matter with the Council?" "Food," Danny said, laughing gently. "Yes, it is how humans build friendships." Another pause. Longer this time. "I will need to review the contents of what you plan to serve. For security purposes." Danny thought nothing of this request. She transmitted her menu with pride. It had taken her weeks to plan. Aged cheeses from France and Italy. Kimchi from Korea. Sourdough bread baked fresh in the ship's kitchen. Wine from Chile and Spain. Cured meats from Germany. Yogurt with honey. Pickled vegetables. She had chosen dishes that represented humanity's diversity, its creativity, its love for flavor and tradition. The silence that followed lasted nearly 10 minutes. When Sorvin spoke again, his voice had changed. It was higher, faster, almost panicked. "Human ambassador, my translator must be malfunctioning. It says that several items on your menu involve controlled bacterial decomposition." Danny nodded. "That is correct. Fermentation is one of humanity's oldest food preservation techniques. We have been doing it for thousands of years. And this substance called cheese. The description says it is curdled mammal secretions aged with cultivated mold. Yes, some of our finest cheeses take years to develop their flavor." Sorvin made a sound that the translator could not process. It was somewhere between a gasp and a screech. "Ambassador Reyes, Are you telling me that humans deliberately grow fungus on decomposing animal fluids and then consume it for pleasure? Danny thought about this for a moment. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds strange. But yes, cheese is delicious. Sorvin's transmission cut out abruptly. Danny looked at Captain Leo, confused. Did I say something wrong? Leo shrugged. Maybe he has never had good cheese. They did not hear from Sorvin again for 6 hours. When communication resumed, the insectoid ambassador spoke in a voice that was carefully controlled, as if he was struggling to remain calm. Human delegation. Your menu has been forwarded to the Council's Cultural Exchange Division. They have requested additional information about human biology before your arrival. Specifically, they wish to know about the organisms living inside your bodies. Danny frowned. Organisms? You mean our microbiome? I do not know what that word means, Sorvin said. But the Council's medical division has detected that each human on your vessel contains approximately 38 trillion non-human cells. They wish to know if you are aware of this infection. Danny laughed. Those are not infections. Those are bacteria. Humans cannot survive without them. The transmission went silent again. When Sorvin finally responded, his voice was barely a whisper. You carry trillions of organisms inside you. Willingly. Of course, Danny said. Everyone does. It is perfectly natural. Sorvin's next words would haunt humanity for generations. I need to contact my superiors. Immediately. The medical scanner screamed 3 times before it exploded. Danny Reyes stood perfectly still in the decontamination chamber of Station Premarch while alien doctors rushed around her in panic. She had done nothing except breathe. Apparently, that was enough to cause a diplomatic incident. The readings cannot be correct, said Physician Prime Alora, a gelatinous being who communicated by vibrating her translucent body. The scanner detected 38 trillion foreign organisms inside this creature. That would mean she is more bacteria than human. The scanner is working fine, said Danny calmly. Those are my gut bacteria, my skin bacteria, my mouth bacteria. They help me digest food, fight disease, and regulate my mood. Alora quivered violently, which Danny later learned was the equivalent of screaming. The station itself was beautiful in a cold, sterile way. Everything was made of smooth crystal and polished metal. The air tasted like nothing at all, filtered and purified until it held no scent, no texture, no life. Danny found it deeply uncomfortable. It reminded her of hospitals. The council had sent a welcoming committee, though welcoming was perhaps not the right word. High Arbiter Melix was a crystalline being who looked like a living sculpture of ice. She moved slowly and spoke in musical tones that the translator converted into formal, precise language. She had been assigned to oversee humanity's evaluation, and she clearly wished she had been given a different assignment. Ambassador Reyes, Melix said, her body refracting light in patterns that seemed to express concern. Our medical division has completed its preliminary analysis of your species. I must be honest with you. The results are disturbing. Danny nodded politely. I understand our biology might seem unusual. We evolved on a very competitive planet. Unusual is not the word I would choose. Melix gestured toward a holographic display that appeared in the air between them. This is a magnified image of your digestive system. Do you see these organisms? Danny looked at the image. It showed billions of bacteria swimming through her intestines, breaking down food, producing vitamins, communicating with each other through chemical signals. Yes, she said. Those are my friends. Melix made a sound like breaking glass. Your friends? Ambassador, these organisms are consuming you from the inside. They're eating the food that enters your body. They're producing waste products that enter your bloodstream. By any medical definition, you are suffering from the most severe parasitic infection in recorded galactic history. It is not an infection, Danny said patiently. It is a partnership. Humans cannot survive without these bacteria. They help us digest food that we cannot process on our own. They train our immune systems. Some of them even produce chemicals that affect our emotions. When humans feel happy after eating certain foods, it is often because our gut bacteria are rewarding us. The room went very quiet. A young avian creature named Tef, who had been assigned as Danny's translator, leaned forward with obvious interest. His feathers were bright blue, and his eyes were sharp and curious. Unlike the others, he did not seem disgusted. He seemed fascinated. "You're saying that your emotions are partially controlled by organisms living inside you?" Tef asked. "Partially, yes. Our microbiome influences our mood, our appetite, our sleep patterns, even our social behavior. Humans who have unhealthy gut bacteria often experience depression and anxiety. We're not just humans. We are ecosystems." Allura had recovered enough to speak again, though her body was still trembling. "This is worse than we thought. High Arbiter, I recommend immediate quarantine. These creatures are not a species. They are a collective, a hive. We cannot allow them to contaminate the station." "We are not a hive," Danny said firmly. "We are individuals who have evolved to cooperate with microorganisms. It is not dangerous. It is natural." "Natural?" Allura's voice rose to a frequency that made the translator struggle. "You carry disease inside you as a lifestyle choice. You have made peace with infection. This is not natural. This is biological insanity." Melix raised one crystalline limb, calling for silence. "Physician Prime, control yourself." "Ambassador Reyes, I must ask you a direct question. You mentioned that humans evolved on a competitive planet. How competitive exactly?" Danny thought carefully before answering. "Earth is a death world by galactic standards. We have predators, parasites, extreme temperatures, natural disasters, and diseases that have killed billions of our people throughout history. Our immune systems evolved by fighting constant battles against organisms trying to consume us. Eventually, we learned that it was easier to cooperate with some of them than to fight all of them. You negotiated with your invaders," Tef said softly. "Yes. We made alliances with bacteria that were useful and developed defenses against bacteria that were harmful. Our bodies are battlefields that have reached a kind of peace." Melix was silent for a long moment. The light inside her body flickered in complex patterns that Danny could not interpret. "Ambassador Reyes, I have reviewed your proposed menu for the diplomatic dinner. I see items that involve deliberate cultivation of fungus, intentional bacterial decomposition, and consumption of microbial waste products. Is this correct?" "Yes. Fermented foods are a cornerstone of human cuisine. They are delicious and nutritious." "You eat rot," Melix said flatly. "You grow mold on purpose and put it in your mouth. You drink the waste products of yeast. You cultivate bacteria on vegetables and call it delicacy." Danny paused. "Well, yes, when you put it that way." Melix's body chimed with a sound that might have been a sigh. "The dinner will proceed as scheduled. The council wishes to observe human food practices firsthand. Medical teams will be stationed throughout the banquet hall. I recommend that no council member consume anything, but observation is acceptable." Danny smiled hopefully. "Perhaps once they try the cheese, they will understand." Tef made a small chirping sound that his translator rendered as nervous laughter. Allura simply vibrated in silent horror. As Danny was escorted to her quarters, she noticed that every surface she had touched was being immediately sanitized by robotic drones. The walls she had walked past were being scanned for contamination. The air she had breathed was being filtered and recycled. She was beginning to understand that this mission might be more difficult than anyone on Earth had imagined, but she still believed that food could bring people together. Even people made of crystal and light. Even people who had never known the joy of a perfectly aged cheese or the comfort of warm bread fresh from the oven. She just needed to show them. What could possibly go wrong? The first ambassador fainted when Danny opened the wine. She had not even poured it yet. She had simply removed the cork, and the smell of fermented grapes drifted across the grand diplomatic hall of Station Pre-March. That was enough. Ambassador Creel, a tall being made of woven silver threads, collapsed onto the floor with a sound like wind chimes falling downstairs. Medical drones rushed to assist him while Danny stood frozen, wine bottle in hand, wondering what she had done wrong. "Perhaps," said Captain Leo quietly, "we should have started with water." The Grand Diplomatic Hall was the most impressive room Danny had ever seen. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling that displayed the actual stars outside, unfiltered and infinite. Floating platforms carried representatives from dozens of species, each more strange and beautiful than the last. There were beings of light, beings of stone, beings that looked like floating clouds of colored gas. All of them had come to witness humanity's presentation. All of them were now staring at the wine bottle like it was a weapon. High Arbiter Melix glided forward, her crystalline body catching the starlight. Ambassador Reyes, please explain what you have just opened. Danny took a deep breath. This is wine. It is one of humanity's oldest beverages. We make it by crushing grapes and allowing them to ferment. Ferment, Melix repeated. My translator tells me this means controlled decomposition. In a sense, yes. Yeast consumes the sugar in the grapes and produces alcohol as a byproduct. Humans have been making wine for over 8,000 years. It is a symbol of celebration, friendship, and culture. A murmur rippled through the assembled aliens. Danny heard fragments of translated conversation. Decomposition beverage. 8,000 years of poison. They drink death. A being made of pure light, whose name Danny could not pronounce, floated closer. You are telling us that this liquid contains the waste products of microorganisms? And you consume it willingly? Yes. The alcohol gives it a pleasant effect on our nervous system. The flavor develops complexity over time. Some wines are aged for decades before they reach their peak. Aged, the light being repeated. You allow it to continue decomposing. You prefer it when it has rotted longer. Danny winced. That is one way to describe it. Ambassador Creel had recovered enough to speak from his medical platform. I apologize for my reaction. The smell triggered an ancient survival instinct in my species. On our home world, that odor indicates lethal fungal infection. I am sorry, Danny said sincerely. I did not mean to cause distress. Perhaps we should move to the food. This was a mistake. She had arranged the dishes beautifully on a long table of polished crystal. The cheeses were displayed on wooden boards, their surfaces showing the characteristic veins and spots of careful aging. The kimchi glowed orange-red in ceramic bowls. The sourdough bread was still warm, its crust crackling, its interior soft and tangy from the wild yeast that had made it rise. The cured meats were sliced thin, their deep colors showing months of patient preservation. Danny had never been more proud of a meal. The council had never been more horrified. Were those spots on that white substance? Asked a delegate who resembled a floating jellyfish. That is blue cheese, Danny explained. The blue color comes from cultivated mold. We inject the cheese with specific fungal spores and allow them to grow. It gives the cheese a sharp, tangy flavor. 3 more ambassadors fainted. High Arbiter Melix approached the cheese slowly, as if it might attack her. You grow fungus, deliberately, inside food, and then you eat it. Yes, humans have been making cheese for thousands of years. It is one of our greatest culinary achievements. This is not achievement, said Prosecutor Vin, a reptilian being who had been watching with undisguised disgust. This is biological terrorism. Danny tried to redirect. Perhaps the kimchi would be more acceptable. It is simply vegetables preserved in salt and spices. My scanner detects billions of bacteria in that bowl, said Physician Primalora, who had positioned herself as far from the food as possible. Those vegetables are alive with microorganisms. That is the point, Danny said. Fermentation preserves the vegetables and creates beneficial bacteria that aid human digestion. Kimchi has been part of Korean culture for centuries. You eat living bacteria, Alora said flatly. You put organisms into your mouth and swallow them so they can join the trillions already living in your gut. Yes, it is very healthy. The photosynthetics, a group of plant-like beings who had been silent until now, suddenly began vibrating with distress. Their leader, a tall figure with leaves instead of hair, spoke in a voice like rustling wind. Ambassador Reyes, we have been researching human agricultural practices. We have learned something deeply disturbing. Is it true that humans create a substance called compost? Danny nodded cautiously. Yes, Compost is decayed organic matter. We use it to fertilize our plants. You feed your plants with death, the photosynthetic said. You take dead things, allow them to rot, and then spread the rot on your gardens so your food can grow from it. The cycle of nutrients, Danny said. Death feeds life on Earth. Nothing is wasted. The photosynthetics began to leave the hall in silent horror. Several other delegations followed. Tef, the translator, was the only alien who remained close to the food. His blue feathers were ruffled with excitement rather than fear. Ambassador Reyes, may I try something? Danny smiled gratefully. Of course. What would you like? The bread. It smells interesting. She cut him a small piece of sourdough. Tef took it carefully in his clawed hand and placed it in his beak. He chewed slowly, his eyes widening. This is remarkable, he said. There is complexity here. Texture. Something alive in the taste. That is the wild yeast, Danny said. Sourdough is made with a living culture that must be fed and maintained. Some sourdough starters have been kept alive for over 100 years. You keep bacteria alive for generations, Tef said. You pass them down like family heirlooms. Yes, my grandmother gave me her starter. It is over 60 years old. Tef made a sound of wonder, but he was alone in his appreciation. High Arbiter Melix called an emergency recess. The dinner was officially suspended. Medical teams swarmed the hall, scanning for contamination, sterilizing every surface the human food had touched. As Danny watched her carefully prepared meal being treated like a biohazard, she finally understood the magnitude of the problem. Humanity had not come to the stars to make enemies, but they had brought something the galaxy had never encountered before. They had brought a culture built on decay, on cooperation with microorganisms, on the ancient understanding that death and life were partners rather than enemies, and the galaxy was not ready. Melix approached her one final time before the recess began. Ambassador Reyes, the Council will convene tomorrow to discuss humanity's status. I recommend you prepare a defense. A defense? Danny asked. For what? Melix's crystalline body dimmed. For being what you are. The Chamber of Judgment had seen thousands of species evaluated over millions of years. None had ever been accused of what humanity now faced. Danny Reyes stood alone in a circle of light while representatives from 400 civilizations watched from floating platforms above. The chamber was ancient, carved from a single asteroid that had been hollowed out and polished until its walls reflected light like dark mirrors. In this place, species had been welcomed into galactic society. In this place, species had been condemned to isolation. Today, humanity would learn its fate. Prosecutor Venn circled her slowly. The reptilian legal expert moved with cold precision, his scales catching the light as he spoke. Ambassador Reyes, you represent a species that has committed crimes against biological decency. Crimes that the Council has never before witnessed. Crimes that challenge our fundamental understanding of civilized existence. We have committed no crimes, Danny said firmly. We have simply lived according to our nature. Your nature, Venn repeated. Let us examine your nature. Council members, I present evidence, item 1. A holographic image appeared in the air, showing a human digestive system in extreme detail. Billions of bacteria swam through intestines, clustered in the stomach, lined the walls of organs. Humans carry approximately 38 trillion microorganisms inside their bodies. They do not fight these invaders. They do not seek medical treatment. They celebrate this condition. They call health. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Danny remained silent. Evidence, item 2. The image changed to show fermentation tanks, cheese caves, kimchi jars, sourdough starters. The infrastructure of human food preservation. Humans deliberately cultivate bacteria and fungus. They grow mold on food and consume it. They allow vegetables to decompose and call the result a delicacy. They crush fruit, let it rot with yeast, and drink the poisonous byproduct. They've been doing this for 8,000 years. Objection, said Defender Oris, an amphibian lawyer who had been assigned to represent humanity. He looked deeply uncomfortable with his assignment, but duty was duty. The term poisonous is misleading. While alcohol is technically toxic, Humans have evolved to process it safely in moderate amounts. Evolved to process poison, Vin said. Thank you for that clarification. Evidence Item 3. A new image appeared, showing human medical practices. Vaccines, antibiotics, probiotics. Humans deliberately inject themselves with weakened pathogens to train their immune systems. They call this vaccination. They intentionally expose their bodies to disease so they can learn to fight it. When asked about this practice, Ambassador Reyes described it as normal. Danny stepped forward. It is normal. Vaccination has saved billions of human lives. It is one of our greatest medical achievements. You wage biological warfare against yourselves, Vince said. You treat infection as a teacher rather than an enemy. This is not medicine. This is madness. Defender Oris raised a web hand. The Council must acknowledge that human biology evolved under extreme conditions. Earth is a death world. The human immune system is a product of constant struggle against pathogens. Their methods may seem extreme, but they are effective. Effective at what? Ven demanded. At normalizing decay? At embracing rot? At making peace with the organisms that consume corpses? The word corpses echoed through the chamber. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Vin turned back to Danny. Ambassador Reyes, please explain to the Council what happens to a human body after death. Danny hesitated. It decomposes, like all organic matter. And what causes this decomposition? Bacteria, fungi. The same organisms that help us digest food while we are alive begin to break down our tissues after death. So the creatures living inside you, Vin said slowly, are simply waiting. They help you while you are useful to them. And when you die, they consume you. That is one way to look at it. And you accept this? You make peace with organisms that will one day eat your flesh. Danny took a deep breath. We do not have a choice. Death is part of life on Earth. Every living thing will eventually return to the soil and become nutrients for new life. We do not fear this. We understand it. The chamber fell silent. High Arbiter Melix spoke for the first time. Ambassador Reyes, several species in this council have religious prohibitions against acknowledging mortality. Your statements today have caused significant distress. The Eternal Light Collective has filed a formal complaint. They believe that your philosophy of death acceptance is a form of spiritual corruption. Danny looked up at the floating platforms, searching for understanding. She found mostly fear, disgust, confusion. Only Tef the translator showed something different. His blue feathers were pressed flat against his body, but his eyes were bright with something that might have been admiration. May I speak? Danny asked. Melix nodded. Danny stepped into the center of the light and addressed the entire council. You call us disgusting because we live with bacteria. You call us mad because we embrace decay. But everything you fear about us is simply the truth of biological existence. Life consumes life. Death feeds life. This is not corruption. This is reality. Other species have moved beyond such primitive cycles. Vin interrupted. Have you? Or have you simply hidden from them? Danny's voice grew stronger. Humans did not choose to evolve on a death world. We did not choose to fight parasites and predators and diseases for millions of years. But we survived. And we survived because we learned to work with the forces that threatened us instead of pretending they did not exist. She pointed at the holographic images still floating in the air. You see bacteria and call them invaders. We see partners. You see decay and call it horror. We see transformation. You see death and turn away. We face it, accept it, and find beauty in the cycle it creates. The chamber remained silent. Vin recovered first. Pretty words, Ambassador, but they do not change the facts. Humanity represents a biological philosophy that is incompatible with galactic civilization. I call for a vote. High Arbiter Melix rose, her crystalline body chiming softly. The Council will now vote on humanity's application for membership, all in favor of acceptance. A handful of lights appeared on the floating platforms. Danny counted them. 12. 12 species out of 400. All opposed. The chamber filled with light. Hundreds of votes against. Melix's voice was gentle, almost sad. Ambassador Reyes. The Council has voted to deny humanity membership. Furthermore, human vessels are banned from Council space, effective immediately. This is not punishment. It is protection. For us, and perhaps for you. Danny felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. All her hopes, all her preparations, all her grandmother's recipes. None of it had mattered. May I ask one question? She said quietly. Melix nodded. What did we do wrong? Truly? We came in peace. We wanted to share our culture. We wanted to learn from yours. Melix was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Ambassador Reyes, you did nothing wrong. You simply exist. And what you are is more than we can accept. Danny nodded slowly. I understand. But as she was escorted from the chamber, she saw Tef watching her with those bright, curious eyes. And she knew that not everyone in the galaxy agreed with the Council's decision. Perhaps that would matter someday. 5 years after the trial, humanity had become the galaxy's dirty secret. They were not welcome in Council space. They were not invited to diplomatic gatherings. Their ships were turned away from major ports, and their communications were filtered through layers of quarantine protocols. Officially, humans did not exist in galactic society. Unofficially, everyone needed them. Danny Reyes had returned to Earth after the disaster at Station Pre-March. She had spent months answering questions, writing reports, trying to explain to her government how a dinner party had become an interstellar incident. Eventually, she had retired to a small farm in Portugal, where she grew vegetables and made cheese and tried not to think about the stars. But the stars kept calling. The first request came from the Mining Consortium, a group of rock-based species who extracted minerals from dead worlds. They had a problem. Toxic biological waste was accumulating in their processing facilities, and their sterile cleaning methods could not break it down. They needed someone who understood decay. Humans were happy to help. For a price. The second request came from the Terraforming Guild. They wanted to transform barren planets into living worlds, but their methods kept failing. They could create atmosphere and water, but life refused to take hold. The soil remained dead. They needed someone who understood how to make dirt come alive. Humans knew all about compost. Within 3 years, humanity had carved out a niche in galactic commerce. They handled the jobs that no one else would touch. Bioremediation, waste processing, corpse disposal, ecosystem revival. Anywhere that decay needed to happen, humans were there, rolling up their sleeves and getting their hands dirty. They were still banned from the Council. They were still considered disgusting. But they were also essential. Tef had left Council service to study humanity firsthand. The young avian researcher had written a controversial thesis titled Death-Positive Civilizations, a new framework for understanding human biology. It had been rejected by every major academic institution in Council space. He did not care. He had found something more valuable than approval. He had found truth. He was visiting Earth when the plague began. The first reports came from the outer territories, far from Council control. A new pathogen was spreading through populations that had never experienced disease. Species with sterile internal environments had no defenses. Their immune systems, designed for clean worlds, simply shut down when confronted with infection. Within weeks, the plague had reached Council space. Within months, it was a crisis. Captain Leo Okonkwo received the emergency transmission on a quiet afternoon. He had continued commanding the Horizon's Edge, running cargo between human colonies and the few alien ports that would accept them. He was not expecting a call from Physician Prime Alora. Captain Okonkwo. Alora's voice trembled through the translator. I am contacting you in violation of 17 Council protocols. I do not care. We need help. Leo leaned forward. What kind of help? The plague is killing us. Millions have died. Our medicine cannot stop it. Our sterilization techniques make it worse. We have tried everything. What does this have to do with humans? Alora was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was small. Your species lives with infection. You have immune systems designed to negotiate with pathogens. You understand disease in ways that we cannot comprehend. We need that understanding now. The Council banned us, Leo said carefully. They called us disgusting. They said we were incompatible with civilization. I know what we said. I know what we did. I am asking anyway. Leo thought about the empty seats at the diplomatic dinner. He thought about Danny's face when the vote was announced. He thought about 5 years of being treated like a biohazard while also being hired to clean up everyone else's biological messes. I will need to consult with someone, he said finally. Stand by. He found Danny in her garden, surrounded by tomato plants and fermenting jars of pickles. The Portuguese sun was warm on her face, and she looked more peaceful than he had seen her in years. They want our help, he said. The council. There's a plague. Danny did not look up from her work. I heard. Tef told me. What do you want to do? She was quiet for a long time. Her hands moved through the soil, checking roots, pulling weeds, nurturing life from decay. They banned us for understanding death, she said finally. They rejected us for making peace with the organisms that break down bodies. And now those same organisms are killing them. Ironic, Leo agreed. No, not ironic. Inevitable. Danny stood and wiped her hands on her apron. They try to separate themselves from the biological truth of existence. They built sterile worlds and pretended that decay did not exist. But you cannot escape entropy. You can only learn to live with it. So we should help them. Danny looked at the sky, at the sun that had nurtured life on Earth for billions of years, at the world that had taught humanity to embrace rot and call it beautiful. We should help them, she said. But on one condition. Name it. They have to watch. They have to see how we do it. No more hiding in sterile chambers while humans do the dirty work. If they want to survive, they have to learn what we know. Leo nodded slowly. That might be harder for them than the plague itself. Danny smiled, and there was no warmth in it. I know. She sent her response to Alora that evening. She would come. She would bring doctors and scientists and chefs. She would teach the council how to live with bacteria, how to cultivate beneficial microorganisms, how to build immune systems that cooperated with infection instead of collapsing before it. But first, they would watch her prepare a meal. If they cannot stomach my grandmother's kimchi, she told Leo as they prepared to leave Earth, then they are not ready to survive. Tef met them at the border of council space. His blue feathers were ruffled with excitement. You came. I knew you would come. We are human, Danny said. We do not abandon people in need. Even people who rejected us. Even people who called you disgusting. Danny shrugged. We have been called worse. Now, take me to the High Arbiter. We have work to do. As the horizon's edge crossed into council space for the first time in 5 years, Danny thought about her grandmother's hands, kneading bread, stirring kimchi, tending to the sourdough starter that had been alive for generations. Those hands had understood something that the galaxy was only beginning to learn. Life was not clean. Life was not sterile. Life was messy and complicated and full of organisms that wanted to consume you. The secret was learning to make friends with them. High Arbiter Melix had not eaten in 300 years. Her species absorbed energy directly from starlight, and the concept of consuming organic matter had always seemed barbaric to her. Now she sat in a medical ward on Station Premarch, watching her crystalline body dim as the plague slowly killed her, and wondered if she had been wrong about everything. Danny Reyes stood beside her bed, holding a small ceramic bowl. The contents smelled strange, sour and sharp, and alive in ways that Melix's translator could not adequately describe. This is yogurt, Danny said gently. It contains billions of beneficial bacteria. If you consume it, those bacteria will begin colonizing your system. They will train your body to recognize the plague pathogen and fight it. Melix's light flickered weakly. You are asking me to become infected. Deliberately. I'm asking you to form an alliance. The same alliance the humans have maintained for millions of years. The bacteria will help you. In return, you will provide them with a home. And if I refuse, Danny did not look away. Then you'll die, like the millions who have already died. Like the millions more who will die unless the council learns what we know. The medical ward was filled with dying aliens. Hundreds of species, all suffering from the same condition. Their sterile bodies had no framework for fighting infection. Their immune systems, designed for clean worlds, simply surrendered when confronted with an enemy they had never imagined. Human doctors moved between the beds, explaining treatments, offering comfort, trying to save lives that the galaxy had once declared superior to their own. Tef was translating for a group of photosynthetics who could not understand why they needed to accept bacteria into their root systems. Think of it like fertilizer, he said. Humans have always known that death feeds life. Now you must learn the same lesson. The photosynthetics trembled, but listened. Melix watched all of this from her bed. She had spent centuries believing that humans were primitive, disgusting, biologically obscene. She had voted to ban them from council space. She had called their food practices horrifying and their philosophy corrupt. Now those same humans were saving her civilization. Ambassador Reyes, she said softly. Just Danny, please. I'm not an ambassador anymore. Danny, I owe you an apology. I owe all humans an apology. We judged you without understanding. We feared what we did not comprehend. Danny sat down beside her. You judged us for being honest about what we are. Humans have always known that we are temporary. Our bodies are borrowed matter, organized for a few decades before returning to the cycle. We eat things that are rotting because we know that we will rot too, someday. It is not disgusting. It is simply true. How do you live with that knowledge? Melix asked. How do you face each day knowing that you are dying? We do not just face it. We celebrate it. Every meal is a reminder that life requires death. Every breath contains molecules that were once part of other living things. We are connected to everything that has ever lived and everything that ever will live. That is not horror. That is beauty. Melix was silent for a long moment. The light inside her body pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Give me the yogurt, she said finally. Danny helped her consume it. The process was difficult. Melix's body had never processed organic matter before, and the sensation was deeply uncomfortable. But she persisted, swallowing the thick, sour substance, feeling it slide down into her core. Within hours, she began to feel different. The plague's grip on her system weakened. Her light grew stronger. The bacteria were doing their work, teaching her body to fight, forming the alliance that humans had understood since the beginning of their existence. She was not cured immediately. Recovery would take weeks, but she would survive, and she would never look at humans the same way again. Tef publishes research 3 months later. His paper, The Biological Philosophy of Earth, How Humans Learned to Love Decay, became required reading in medical institutions across council space. It explained how human immune systems worked, how fermentation preserved food, how the cycle of death and rebirth that humans called composting was actually the fundamental engine of all biological existence. The council did not officially lift the ban on humanity. Politics moved slowly, and there were still many species who could not accept what humans represented. But the unofficial relationships multiplied. Human doctors trained alien physicians. Human farmers taught alien agricultural specialists how to create living soil. Human chefs opened restaurants on stations throughout the galaxy, serving fermented foods to customers who were learning to appreciate rot. 1 year after the plague ended, High Arbiter Melix visited Danny's farm in Portugal. She stood in the garden, surrounded by tomato plants and fermenting jars and the rich smell of compost, and tried to understand why humans found this beautiful. You saved us, she said. The council wishes to offer humanity full membership as a gesture of gratitude. Danny was kneading bread, her hands covered in flour and wild yeast. I know. We discussed it. We declined. Why? Because you banned us for being honest about what we are. You rejected us for understanding death. If we join you now, we will be accepting that we were wrong. We were not wrong. Melix's crystalline body chimed softly. Then what do you want? Danny shaped the dough carefully, forming it into a round loaf that would rise overnight and bake in the morning. We will be neighbors, allies, teachers when you are ready to learn. But we will not pretend to be something we are not. Humans abraça da caí. Humans live with bacteria. Humans understand that death is not the enemy of life, but its partner. And if the council cannot accept that, Danny smiled, then we will be here anyway, handling your waste, reviving your dead worlds, doing the jobs that you consider too disgusting to do yourselves. And eventually, You will realize that the things you fear most are the things that will save you. Melek stood in the garden for a long time, feeling the alien sun on her crystalline surface, watching worms move through the soil, smelling the sharp tang of fermentation from the nearby jars. "May I try the kimchi?" she asked finally. Danny laughed and brought her a small bowl. Melix tasted it carefully, letting the sour, spicy, living flavor spread through her being. "It is alive," she said. "Yes, it is dying. Also, yes, it is delicious." Danny's smile was warm and genuine. "Now you understand." Melix ate the rest of the kimchi slowly, savoring each bite. When she finished, she looked at the human woman who had taught the galaxy the most important lesson it had ever learned. "What happens now?" she asked. Danny returned her bread. "Now we keep living. We keep dying. We keep turning death into life and life into death. That is what humans do. That is what all living things do, whether they admit it or not. And the council will learn, or the council will die. Those are the only options the universe offers." Melix nodded slowly. For the first time in her long existence, she understood. Life was not clean. Life was not permanent. Life was a temporary arrangement of borrowed matter, dancing briefly before returning to the cycle. Humans had always known this. They had built their entire civilization around it. And now, finally, the galaxy was beginning to understand why.